What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Totem Talks, episode 1, featuring your local cover band, Low Totem.
Everybody's local cover band, regardless of where you are.
Exactly. And Tyler. Let's not forget Tyler.
Yes, of course, Tyler's here.
So, real quick, let's all take a second to introduce ourselves. I'm Pat. I am the lead singer of Low Totem.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, I am Nick, and I am also in Low Totem. I sing sometimes with Pat, but I'm also the guitarist and keyboardist for that band.
I am Tyler. I am the leading sound engineer of Low Totem. I'm the reason why they sound as good as they do.
You should probably start running sound then.
Yeah,
for us,
I mean,
if you're gonna
I
say
feel
that.
like you've just volunteered to run our sound from here on out. So,
well, I do know a lot about running sound.
Perfect. Good.
Perfect.
Good. So anyway, we're going to give you a little bit of what this is about. Basically, we had an idea, and we're taking bands and ranking them, and we're going to score them based on different criteria, and each week is going to be a different set of bands, and that's it. We're going to compile a list, and we're going to all work together to do it, and it's going to require us to listen to a lot of music maybe we haven't normally listened to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's mainly going to be Nick and Pat's opinions. I'm just going to be here as the tiebreaker. I'm also going to try to keep everything, safe.
Yeah, right.
In case an argument comes up.
Of course.
That's
I think it's a really
call.
Good dynamic, too, that we have, because I feel like we have 3 very different musical backgrounds and levels of knowledge of different bands coming into this. So we'll bring a lot of different perspectives to each band we look at.
Because Pat and Nick have a musical background, and I don't.
Oh, you have a little bit of a musical background.
A little bit.
See, the difference between us is that Nick spent his entire life listening to a lot of these like classic rock bands and stuff like that, and I did theater. Right. So I really didn't.
I spent my childhood listening to Weird Al Yankovic.
That seems
who we
really
will
accurate,
probably
actually.
cover at some point.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
That episode will be a special deluxe 3-hour episode. 'Cause it'll be the only episode where my opinions will matter for anything.
Of course. So anyway, I guess we should go over. So we're rating all these bands, but how are we doing it? So I'll take a little bit of time to break down what we're going to be talking about with every band on every episode. So we've got 5 categories that they're all going to be judged by. The first category is cultural impact, so how important were they to shaping culture and musical culture going forward? The breadth of work, so how much work have they released? How many songs, how many albums, how many good songs or good albums? Instrumental talent, so how good relative to the other bands is this band when it comes to their musicianship, their vocal talent. So, and keep in mind, all of these things are going to be relative to the other bands, because obviously all these recording artists have talent at one level or another more so than probably the average person. So a 10 just means you're the best of all of the professional bands, whereas a 5 means you're very, very average for all of these professional bands. Still, obviously, much better than the average person. Songwriting talent is the 4th factor. So, to me, and feel free to chip in on this, guys, if you want to add anything. But to me, songwriting talent is about a blending of a lot of different factors. It's how many different styles can you write with. It's how many different instrumentations can you use. It's how many different ways can you incorporate harmonies and backing vocals and different layered instruments, and like basically, is there a lot of different interesting variety to all of your songs?
Or are you just really good at making the same style new, fresh, unique every time?
Good. Yes, excellent point to add that in. And then the 5th and final factor is poetic talent. So how good are your lyrics? Are you writing like really meaningful and beautiful poetry, or are you just saying a bunch of nonsense? Lastly, so that the 10 possible points for all those factors gives bands a maximum score of 50. However, we will allow up to 5 points for an X factor. If there is something really super special about this artist that we somehow missed in our 5 main categories, X factor gives us a chance to explore that a little bit more and maybe award a few bonus points for whatever reason, we'll see as we come up with them.
Yeah.
And then we'll get a final score out of, technically 55 would be the highest. I don't think we're going to see anything in that range ever for any reason. But that is the maximum number of points.
I will say every time we talk about the the maximum number, I want to do the Santana's 55. Like, I'm pretty sure I heard that in another podcast though, so we can't do that.
No, definitely don't do that. So that's it. I mean, that's the whole gist of what we're about to do. Does anyone else have any other important or pertinent things to say before we start talking about the bands that we looked at for episode number 1?
No. I think you pretty much covered all the rules very clearly.
Awesome. So who did we listen to today, Tyler?
Today?
Well, we listened to them.
Who are the
today.
bands we're going over today?
Today is going to be the Beatles.
Absolutely.
That is correct.
NSYNC.
That is correct.
Oasis.
And that
And
is
there we
the
go.
3.
Yeah. So
And I listed them in order of talent.
Oh, jeez.
controversy right from the start.
Wow. Okay.
That'll be
Funnily enough, we are going to do Oasis first.
Yes, we'll do in reverse order.
So a little bit of stuff about Oasis. Obviously, they're an English rock band. They were formed in 1991. They were active until 2009. So just a little bit about them there.
Yeah. All right. And we listened to which albums?
Yeah, so the 3 albums we listened to, and this is a pretty consistent formula for what we wanted to do when we listened to these bands. We listened to their first album, their last album, and then their most commercially successful album. So for Oasis, that is Definitely Maybe, which was released in 1994. Their last album, which is Dig Out Your Soul, which was released in 2008. And then their most popular album, which is What's the Story, Morning Glory, which came out in 1995.
All right.
So those are the 3 albums. And Nick, you have any opinions on these albums?
Yeah. So I mean, let's just start right from the start with Definitely Maybe.
Yeah.
This album for me, like, and I don't mean this in a negative way necessarily, is like their noisiest album.
Right.
There's something about, like, it just feels like you're kind of getting hit with a wall of sound with a lot of these tracks. Very like old rock blues inspired. Particularly my favorite track on this album was Cigarettes and Alcohol, which is just straight up blues all the way through. I really liked it. Rock and Roll Star was a really good start to this album too, I think.
Yeah.
There are a couple of other songs that had nice riffs going on, and other cool stuff. Slide Away I thought was cool. Married with Children I thought was cool. What do you guys think?
I agree for most of that. I thought that it had a lot of interesting moments. Definitely when I think Oasis, I don't really think of any of these songs necessarily.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely.
But listening to it was interesting because you could almost hear like the beginnings of that like Oasis sound that you know now.
As somebody who, I grew up listening to music, but I never grew up really as fans of artists particularly. My dad used to DJ, so, and I'm not talking about like, spinning records and stuff like I mean like doing weddings and stuff. So I always had kind of like this, like, there were a lot of songs that I listened to that I ended up not even knowing were Oasis songs because I just memorizing bands and whatnot was just not something that I did musically. I had a large collection of songs that I liked and enjoyed and would burn to CDs and whatnot, in the early days of LimeWire, but I didn't necessarily have like a particular band that I would cling to. What I loved about listening to Oasis was it was pretty much kind of like going into a time machine. It really does kind of bring you right back to the 90s. Like as soon as you hear their music, you instantly know what decade it came out in. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for them. I personally don't see it as a negative thing. No. I love the nostalgia of listening to their music. Is like obviously, you put that on and just like I don't think that Kevin Smith has ever used Oasis in his movies, but listening...
No, I get it.
But listening to Oasis, like, just made me think of Clerks and Mallrats and just, like, that whole, like, period of time.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's cool insight on that. Now, do you want to go last and save the best the best for last? We can do Dig Out
Yeah,
Your
yeah,
Soul
we
next?
can go into Dig Out Your Soul real quick.
All right, do you want to? I opened up the other ones, so I'll let you get your thoughts in first, Patrick.
Sure,
And then Tyler can do his thoughts first on.
Okay, so for Dig Out Your Soul, again, I didn't love it. Definitely, you could tell that their sound had like shifted a little bit. In the later years. I mean, these songs came out significantly later than What's the Story and Definitely Maybe. I did like a couple of them. Shock of the Lightning I thought was pretty good. Falling Down was pretty good. This album featured the most songs from what we listened to that weren't written by Noel Gallagher.
Right.
And you could tell. You could really tell, like, they sounded different. Like, I'm Out of Time, which was written by Liam.
Which I actually liked. I
didn't dislike it.
Okay.
It just, you could tell that it was, like, not... Yeah. When you think of Oasis, you think of a specific sound, and it definitely didn't have that. But other than that, I mean, it was a good album. It was a strong album. The lack of musical talent is not what broke up Oasis, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The absolute hatred of the brothers in the band is what broke it up, but...
For sure. Yeah, I mean, just kind of going off what you said, like, the very first thing that I have, like, written next to the album, so I have in my notes, Dig Out Your Soul, noticeably different.
Yes.
Like, right away, it's like, okay, this is, like, not the same Oasis that we heard 15 years before. And I thought that it started solid, but a lot of it was kind of forgettable. Like, not bad, but you could listen to it one time and just be like, huh. Yeah. I can't sing back any of the songs on this album.
Yep.
You know?
I sort of felt like, their early stuff was very like them. You could definitely like pick Oasis out just listening to it. And then their last album didn't come out in, wasn't it 2008 that album came out? Yeah. It just sort of sounded like a generic alternative rock album of 2008. Nothing about it really screamed Oasis to me. Like, just listening to it, if nobody told me, oh, this is Oasis's new album, if I were into Oasis back then and suddenly they dropped this album in 2008 and it was just playing and nobody told me, I wouldn't have been able to even, and not like I wouldn't have been able to guess it was an Oasis song. And even when you told me it was an Oasis song, I'd be like, oh, I hope it's not an Oasis song. Like, it just, it just became like, they kind of went from almost defining the genre of alternative rock to just almost becoming a parody of alternative rock.
And that's, I like that you're talking about alternative rock because, like, when they came out, it was the grunge had taken over the alternative rock scene, and you can feel that influence, but also like that earlier pop rock Beatles-y type influence as well, and it's an interesting blend that they have.
And we should probably mention that Oasis, like, while they were making music in the 90s and stuff, was like widely compared to the Beatles in the UK.
For sure.
For their like chances they took with their song stuff, which almost makes Dig Out Your Soul even more disappointing to me, because like you're a band who's known for taking chances and stuff, and then you come out with an album which sounds good but sounds very plain.
It was just it just felt like a safe album. It wasn't gonna do anything that the fans weren't gonna like, but it also wasn't gonna do anything that the fans were going to come screaming for either.
Safe but very plain could be like what they posted on the front of the album.
Very true. Okay, so obviously we saved their most successful album for last. So What's the Story, Morning Glory? Tyler, your opinions?
I mean, What's the Story, Morning Glory? I mean, obviously, that's the one that Wonderwall is in, which is probably the one, especially in the U.S., I feel like many people will associate with them. I mean, that whole album in and of itself, I have definitely heard those songs in the background of movies. Like, it was that was like definitely the album that like Hollywood and indie directors were all like, okay, we need to like make our movie popular with the young scene, so we'll throw some Oasis songs in the background, and they seem to just all come from that album. I could immediately picture like, Tony Hawk, Pro Skater, those songs in the background. It just fit that whole scene for me.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean that's very true. I mean, all of the songs on this album are much more popular than all the other songs on the other albums that we listen to.
Mm-hmm. They're all good too.
They're all very good. I mean, Wonderwall, it's probably the most overplayed song in the history of songs at this point, but it's still really good, even though it's a meme. Don't Look Back in Anger is a strong song. Some might say is actually the first Oasis song I ever heard.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't remember where I heard it, but it's one of those things where it's like it made me go listen and look up who this band was.
Huh.
I also really like She's Electric. I mean, again,
like
Champagne Supernova, which arguably their best song, I would say.
It's my favorite.
Your favorite,
down.
I know,
it's
is
my favorite, Champagne Supernova. I love it. I think it's great.
But I think strong all the way through, and definitely their most popular album for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have really covered a lot of what I wanted to say about this. I will add, just for some factoids, that this sold 22 million copies. So obviously, it was one of the biggest albums of the 1990s.
Correct.
I mean, it influenced culture, and it was so popular in so many different ways. And like you guys have said, every song is good. Their three biggest hits, arguably, are all on this album, with Wonderwall, Don't Look Back in Anger, and Champagne Supernova. The only song I can think of that they released that might be in that category of popularity is All Around the World, which came on their following album. But otherwise, pretty much the rest of their albums after this didn't have any big hits that really...
No, and I mean, it's definitely reflected
out
in sales. So you brought up sales numbers.
Yeah.
The first two albums definitely maybe sold 15 million worldwide, and What's the Story sold 22 million worldwide, and then they never broke double digits after that.
Right. Yeah.
With Dig Out Your Soul, the last one, only selling 1.6 million worldwide.
Right. Which, of course, is obviously...
Oh, still wonderful in terms of sales.
Exactly.
But just
but
when you're comparing them
it's
to even themselves.
Exactly. They really fell off.
So let's start giving them some scores.
Yes, I agree.
We've been very in-depth on them. So
I agree. So let's start with cultural impact. So I think we've talked at length about how a handful of their songs, especially on What's the Story, Morning Glory, kind of stood the test of time so far for these last 25 years or so, have become, cultural memes. Like Wonderwall is obviously a huge meme. Everybody's like, oh, that guy picked up a guitar, play Wonderwall.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I really like about them though is, with the exception of Wonderwall, they have not become one of those bands that's overplayed. No disrespect to the Beatles or Queen, but it gets to a point where anytime you turn on the radio and you're not listening to classical music, you're listening to rock, you're hearing Bohemian Rhapsody all the time. You're hearing all these. I don't feel like every time I turn on the radio, I'm getting bombarded with the same Oasis songs. If Oasis comes on the radio, I feel like, oh, cool, they're playing Oasis. I don't feel like, oh my God, they've reached this point of fame where it's just the same four songs all the time.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I totally get that.
And I will say, I think another point that you added on earlier, Pat, has kind of grown the Oasis lore, so to say, which is that huge rivalry between Liam and Noel Gallagher, how much those two brothers hated each other's guts and all the drama that kind of surrounded that. That was a big part of their cultural impact, was people watching that story unfold and what's going to happen with these two next. Are they going to stay together, or are they going to break up? Are they going to get together and do one more album, or will they ever talk to each other again?
So far, no.
Yeah, right. But I think that does put them above the average when it comes to cultural impact. So between having some of the biggest hits of the decade and having that kind of personal intrigue, there definitely is more to Oasis that has stuck to the cultural zeitgeist than the average band, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would put them in between the 6 and 7 range personally. I think they're above average. 7 and above I would give to bands that everybody knows the name of and their songs, and I don't think Oasis is there.
I don't think they're there.
I think maybe just Wonderwall, but I don't think if you said, hey, name 5 Oasis songs.
No, most people
would be able to do that.
Most people could probably maybe do 2 or 3, but that's at the most.
Right.
At the most.
So I'm thinking 6.6, 6.5 ish.
I'm not cool. I'm a little bit lower. I'm in the 6 range. I'm in the 6 range for you, but barely.
I don't know. I kind of have to go 5, but then again, that's just kind of how I grew up. I mean, honestly, like I said, I had absolutely no idea who who Oasis was. I knew a whole lot of their songs, and I was sort of aware that such a band existed. I've heard the name, but never attached it to any songs or numbers. But again, that's just me kind of out of the loop. So I'm kind of the uneducated individual.
Okay, fair enough, but I think we can still factor that. So Pat, you were kind of on the mid to higher 6 range, and Tyler's more close to 5. I was somewhere in between you guys in the low 6s.
Yeah.
I would be okay if we did like a 6.2 or something like that.
Sure. I'm okay with 6.2.
Okay.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I do agree with Tyler, like, you know, in like the 5-ish range, but because of the just memality of Wonderwall, like, they have to get points because that is super impactful. Just in and of itself, one song.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so their breadth of work. Obviously, they recorded for many years. They released, you know, quite a few albums.
7
albums. Yeah, and you know, they were all successful albums. I mean, none of them were flops. I mean, even the last one sold 1.6 million, and it went double platinum.
If you would like, for just reference really quickly, so obviously we know they did 15 and 22 mil on the first 2 albums that were huge.
Yeah.
They did 8 million, 3 million, 4.5, 7, and then 1.6. So they were never below a million. They were usually, like, the last one is really an aberration. Like, even their second worst selling album was double Dig Out Your Soul at 3 mil.
Right.
So, but at the same time, can you name any tracks off of any of those albums?
That's what I mean. Just because they were commercially successful with the albums, they definitely didn't have a huge impact on them.
And those are worldwide sales. They're significantly lower in the United States. Like, a lot of that is coming from the UK, which is where
they're based out of the UK, so I don't hold too much against them.
Sure, I know, but I mean, like, the Beatles have obviously sold a lot of albums in America too, even though they were based.
That's
out of the
true,
UK.
but
and that's fine. You know.
I'm thinking more in the 5-ish range for them.
I agree.
In this.
I think 7 studio albums. I mean, we don't really have a good point of reference yet because this is our first band. But as we go through and do more episodes, I think we're going to see that 7 full studio albums over like 13 years or so is like probably better than most recording artists are going to get. At least, you know, in that.
Yeah, but that's in terms of just the number and not always the quality.
Right. There's got to be some market for them or else they won't be able to record albums anymore.
True.
And they'll get dropped from their label. So I think because of that, that puts them slightly above the average. And the fact that they have a few memorable songs and you know, mostly from what's
so what do you think, like 5.5?
I was like 5.3, like just like a little bit over the. What do you think, Tyler?
I mean, I don't know. Again, this is kind of like going into territory I don't really have much experience with, and this is I don't mean to like insult anybody who's a true fan of Oasis, but like I've said a couple times now, I know I've heard these songs, but never did I make any connection to them.
Sure.
I mean, and even though I wasn't like super big on like bands and performers, like I grew up when, you know, the NSYNC was happening, Britney Spears was happening. I was culturally aware that those were musicians, even if I couldn't name a single track that they did. So Oasis, to me, in my childhood, growing up, it left like almost no impact at all. Because I not only could I not name a single track that they put out, but I couldn't tell you if they were just an independent band or a studio band.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. Fair enough.
So I would have to give them a low score, but that's just because of where I'm coming from.
Right.
I mean, I certainly I've learned more about them recently. I see the numbers that they pulled and everything, so I don't want to give them a 1 just because I didn't know about them.
I think like as we do more episodes and you have more points of reference, you'll definitely grow in this a lot more, and I think
you're going to be an interesting, like, one of the main reasons I wanted you to be on the podcast was because you are going to be that, like, almost like the voice of the audience.
Yeah, right.
Because we want to capture people who
just
maybe
insult our audience.
Well, that's true. If you know Tyler, that wasn't an insult. I'm sorry.
We're very sorry, audience. Don't leave us.
I would have to say like a 4 or 5, somewhere in between there.
Okay, so you were thinking like a 5. I'm thinking like a 5, a little bit above a 5 too.
Yeah, like, I was like a little bit above a 5. You were a little bit above a 5.
Tyler's a little bit below a 5.
To any Oasis fans,
do we want to just average that out at a 5 flat? I mean, is that what that means for us?
Yeah, let's do just do a 5. Let's do
I'm
5.
okay with that.
And to any Oasis fans out there, you'll be happy to know I know who they are now.
Yeah,
and
right.
I like their early work, definitely.
Yeah,
so I mean, I'm not trying to say that they're worthless.
And we do know that the system that we have isn't perfect.
Of course not.
Because it's just not feasible for us to listen to
Every band
7
first,
complete
and then,
albums. And, and even more than that. I mean, for instance, one of the episodes that we're doing at some point is Van Morrison. He has like 41 albums.
Yeah, there's no chance.
There's no way we could do that.
That guy's
so
insane.
we try to keep with this formula, and we try to keep consistent, so that way, like, what we come up with.
Why would you release
consistent.
Brown Eye Girl on 47
That
albums?
was
That was his first
album.
And
And then
we'll
he
get into that
released
in another
40
That's all he did
more
after that, right?
Oh. Well, you'll learn. So that brings us to instrumental talent, and I'm just going to flat out say it, like,
They're
not
the
bad.
epitome of
They're
average.
the epitome of average. You
So
took the words
average,
right out of my
yeah.
mouth.
See,
Absolutely.
I'm not a musician, so listening to them, their genre of music is a genre of music that I like.
And I will say, for me, like,
that's a high
I
for
don't
me.
play an instrument. I'm a vocalist,
right.
but I definitely can tell when, like, an instrument jumps out at me, like, oh my gosh, like, that was well done.
Yeah,
And I don't get that for them.
No.
They play their
They're not
instruments
bad.
well. They're not a
There's
detriment.
not a single bad player in the band.
Right.
They're just very average. I don't see them as having like above average guitar or drums
Like,
or bass. Like
hopefully-
they're just solid.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll get better at this, because honestly, like right now, I could not be able to tell you, like, if somebody picked up a guitar and did the riff from Stairway to Heaven versus doing a riff from one of their songs, I would be equally impressed with both of them.
Don't
Fair enough.
just pick up
So-
a guitar and do the riff to Stairway to
Yeah,
Heaven.
I do that at our shows all the time. Get people
I'm
excited
just-
and then stop.
So I'm just saying, like, if someone comes in the room and plays the guitar and does Old MacDonald, I'm like, oh my God, you're a rock star.
Right. No, I get it.
That does not take a lot to get a high point out of that for me.
Fair enough. I mean, I would say because we are going to be comparing this to other people, and compared to all the other musicians, I think I can't give them more than a 5.
No, they
They're
are
just the epitome of average. They're perfect
5s.
Yeah,
Well, for the sake of this podcast, I'll make sure to learn every musical instrument
exactly.
and
Yes, that would be
master
ideal.
them so I can ideally.
Yeah.
do
Perfect.
some time.
If you manage to do that, you might be more than the sound engineer for the band.
Yeah, good point.
If you
I'll
can
go-
master every instrument in existence,
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
I'll go off on my
you
own.
will be our new sitarist.
No, if I learn
more
every
weird
single
Beatles
musical instrument, I'm going to become higher totem and just knock
Just
you
do
guys
weird
out.
rip up.
Good,
Do, like,
perfect.
Weird Al Yankovic, all of our songs.
Okay, so we're going a little
Okay.
long on Oasis. So
Yeah,
songwriting talent. Obviously, when we talk about songwriting in Oasis, we're pretty much talking about Noel Gallagher,
True.
which is interesting. I don't think the fact that the other members of the band didn't really write takes away from the band as a whole.
No. That's just their
Right, that's just
medium.
their style.
Yeah,
I
that's what
mean,
they
but
do.
there are some like musical acts where the fact that they don't write will take away. But
Fair enough.
just the fact that they do have a member of the
Right.
band
Well,
writing.
yeah, as long as the band's writing these tunes themselves.
Correct. So they're better than average. They
agree.
really are. He has some like moments of like real, almost brilliance, I would
Right.
say. But that's coupled with some that are just like a little contrived.
Sure.
Yeah, me personally, I'd probably put them at like a 6 or 7 as
Okay.
far
Okay.
as far as like songwriting goes. Because like Pat was saying, I mean, I don't think my life was changed by listening to any of their songs.
Right.
Like I don't think I was given a new avenue on thinking and feeling. But I also don't feel like I waste my time with them either.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, look, we listened through 3 albums all the way. I didn't come across a song that I thought was bad. I didn't come across a song that I thought was bad. A lot of them were maybe, like, a little bit more forgettable, and I couldn't sing them back afterwards.
Right.
But there were a handful that were very, very good,
Yeah, like
and none of them offended me.
yeah, like some songs I might skip just to get to ones that I preferred more. But I don't think if I were to ever put one of these albums on, I don't think I'd be there ready to skip through tracks. They're all enjoyable to listen to in their own way.
So I will say, like, my personal score for them would be right at a 6.
Yeah, okay.
That's kind of where I was. I thought that they were, above average. I thought that they were, hitting that realm of like really good.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think there's just enough variance between a track like Champagne Supernova and a track like Cigarettes and Alcohol.
Right.
Like there's definitely And then you've got things like Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger in between. Sometimes they incorporate a nice piano feel. Sometimes they're just a hard rock and blues band with a guitar drive and everything. So it's not like they're not versatile.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would have to give them like a high 6 because not only was I able to listen to their songs and enjoy them musically, I also understood what they were about. I know that there's a lot of bands in the alternative genre that have some like really, really like deep, poignant meaning behind their lyrics. You got to listen to it a couple times before you understand it. You know, there's pros and cons to that. I genuinely like being able to sit back and listen to their songs and not have to like play the song 4 times before I understood what it was conveying.
And we'll get to Poetic Talent in a second, too, because I think you got good stuff to say along with
that
we're getting into.
Yeah, I always end up bleeding those two together.
No, I get it. I get
enough.
it.
Yeah,
it was tough to not bleed them together when we came up with the list, but we felt like
there's enough distinction.
There's enough distinction.
So I think you're 6. I'm at around a 6 as well, and Tyler's like a little bit higher on the 6 scale.
I mean, for the sake of numbers, we could just put it at
okay,
a 6.
I was going to say I could average it out, but if you feel comfortable with 6,
I
then
feel
I think
comfortable.
Yeah, I'm okay with the 6.
Move with 6 and take us to Poetic Talent, which I think is definitely one of the stronger suits of this band.
I would say it's the highest for them. I think Noel Gallagher's a very talented lyricist.
For sure. Yeah, and it's not like you said before, it's not contrived, it's not cliche, it's not like you're hearing the same songs about the same 2 or 3 subjects over and over and over again.
It's not cliche, and it's clear what they're about.
Mm-hmm. Right. I honestly, for Poetic Talent for them, I had them at an 8.
Okay, that's
which is high.
I was at like a 7.5.
Okay.
But also very good. I mean, that's still high.
Very
score,
much above that.
Yeah, I would probably go 7 just because I have heard songs that I think kind of spoke to me more than what these did. But I at least, I pride myself on being able to sympathize with people in other situations.
Right.
So while like I might not have, personally identified with any of these numbers, I can understand what somebody could get out of these.
Right. So that, I think, if my math is correct, if we're averaging out a 7, an 8, and a 7.5, that's just going to put us right smack dab in the middle of 7.5 would be about where we fall as a team.
Well, no, the fact that you have a 7.5 would put it at probably like closer to a 7.6. Be a little bit higher, the average.
I mean, I think my math has been solid on this one.
That's why I thought we should go with
to bring out the calculator. I will.
You can bring out the calculator. Yeah, I mean, just try to make me look like an idiot on the podcast. Go ahead.
It's so rare to do.
See, if we went with smiley faces instead of numbers, we would have been fine.
You're perfect, Nick.
I know. I'm exactly right. Thank you.
I'm
glad that you checked the calculator first, but yes, I'm exactly right.
Look, I like just as much as it would have been fun to prove you wrong, it's even more fun to prove you right and lift you up.
Oh, man, you are such a good friend. And that brings us to the final thing for Oasis before we move on to NSYNC. Is there an X Factor?
They got to get a half a point for Wonderwall.
I think that's the strongest argument. Is that song is like literally such a meme.
It's
that
everybody has heard that song.
Sure, absolutely.
Should we just have a category of bands that made meme songs?
Yeah, like I think perhaps memes could be factored.
Yeah,
what is their meme factor?
Right. I'm okay with the half point there. And then
listen, I'll tell you right now, since we're about to do NSYNC, if meme factor was one, they'd have to get a 10.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's gonna be May.
Yeah,
like that. And that is everywhere. Every time April is winding down,
you're a good point.
You just see nothing but Justin Timberlake.
It's gonna be May.
So,
all right, well, let's hit them. Let's do NSYNC, folks. This is gonna be an interesting.
I feel so
here.
bad for them. Honestly, let me put it to you this way. I don't think we dislike NSYNC as much as it's about to come across because we accidentally sandwiched them between Oasis and the last band, which is the Beatles. It's not a good spot for them.
I would just like to say that I love NSYNC. I know that having 2 cousins who were absolutely obsessed with NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys may have swayed me.
Yeah,
fair enough.
But I will say what surprised the hell out of me going through doing this and looking them up and learning about them. In my mind, I thought that NSYNC was dealing out albums every single year.
Oh, yeah, no.
Just 3.
I thought they were a powerhouse.
Yeah, no,
I could not believe that they only put out 3, and then listening through these albums again.
It's like 5 songs.
There's
everybody that likes NSYNC likes about 5 songs.
Correct.
And the rest of them are like, whoa.
Yeah.
So a couple facts about NSYNC.
Yes, please.
Obviously, they're an American boy band. They were formed in 1995. And then they were active technically until 2002.
Right. All the albums came out between 97 and 2001.
Correct. So obviously, since they only released 3 albums, that falls right into our criteria of first, last, and most popular. Right. And that is the first album.
You say 3
NSYNC.
albums, but they definitely had 2 Christmas albums. That
True.
Yeah,
we
we're
are
not
counting
going to
Christmas
personally
albums.
Listen,
neglect
here's what I'm
these.
going to shout out. In 1998, they released the album Home for Christmas, which did go double platinum.
Congratulations.
And I
that
don't
is
know
still
why.
their least popular released album that went platinum at all.
I don't know why it went platinum, because I, even though I didn't have to, listened to it. It was not something I'd ever do again.
Yeah, so...
Well, I'm going to feel that way a lot about a lot of these albums coming up. So
Right, so in 1997, they released the album NSYNC. And then their last album, which came out in 2001, was Celebrity. And now their second album, which is also, coincidentally, their most popular, is No Strings Attached. And if you have even a precursory knowledge of NSYNC at all, that is the album that you know.
Correct.
Even if you don't know it by name, when we go over the tracks, you're going to
Right.
be like, oh, obviously that's the one.
yes.
So, Tyler, why don't you kick us off on this one with the album NSYNC?
So, again, like, I can distinctly remember, like, hanging out with my cousins during the summer, and they were constantly, blasting boy band stuff, and I always just assumed that there was a lot. Because
Yeah.
I guess I just didn't remember how many times we would just replay the same songs, because I thought I knew, like, every NSYNC song.
And then you listen
And
to the
then
album.
I listened to this album, and I guess it seems weird to use the word cliche, because they pretty much invented this cliche. Almost like them, the Backstreet Boys, and like I guess like every pop star that came out in the 90s, like invented this cliche 90s sound. Because like
Yes.
every song is not only just like about the same thing, but it's also taken the same approach and angle about
Yeah.
the same thing. Like it just so cheesy.
Yes.
100%. I will say for me, this album was almost a total dud. It has literally a couple bright spots. Tearing Up My Heart, the
Right.
first track on the album, I would say the most popular song on the album.
That and I Want You Back. Those are
I
the
Want You
two
Back
that
is,
have
yeah.
kind of been like.
I Want You
if
Back is also
remember
close.
those
Yeah,
And I
songs.
will
no,
say
but
both
like-
of them were written by that guy we had talked about before, Max Martin.
Oh yes, right.
So Max Martin is like well known for just writing all of the most famous songs of the 90s. Like
Yeah.
Baby One More Time, I Want It That Way. Like this dude wrote all of them.
Yeah, and it's just like all their songs are either about breaking up or getting back together. It feels.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly.
And-
They're all
but-
super
but
generic.
But like
Yeah.
with no substance behind that either. It's like
Totally.
you listen to these songs and you never get an understanding as to why they broke up or
Yeah,
why
sure.
or what it is that makes them want to be back together again.
Here's what I'm going to say. I know that we're going to spend a lot of time on the last band.
Yeah.
I want to give NSYNC their due, but let's not.
Yeah, I have 2 things to say about this album before we move on.
You say your 2 things,
yeah,
then we'll move on to
because I don't want to
Celebrity.
just. Obviously, I agree with what you guys said already. One, I particularly remember just hating the song "Here We Go." It was so bad. I hated it
Very
and
much.
2, they. The only thing I was excited about coming into this album was seeing that they had covered a song by the soft rock band Bread
Oh,
from the
no.
1970s
Oh.
called Everything I Own. And I was like, I really like that song. I can't wait to hear it. And then they did that cliche 90s boy band like breakdown in the middle where they're like, hey, girl, I know that I've been saying some stuff and things, but I just need you to know that I feel like this. And I was just like, I am going to take my computer and break my face with it if I have to hear this for another second. It was
your computer's not strong enough to break your face. You
it
would
just
break the computer.
ruined that whole song for me so bad. It was like the only thing I could look forward to, and then they just destroyed it. Destroyed it.
And not to go off on a big tangent, but like you said about Here We Go.
Ugh.
Anytime in my own personal opinion, like any time where like a band or an artist has to say their name in the song,
Yep.
I'm always like, you guys just are not.
So you're a
very
big Jason
talented.
Derulo fan.
Yeah, it's like that is just like a really obnoxious thing. Like
I agree.
you shouldn't have to put your signature on the song. Like your talent should sell the song. You shouldn't have to remind your audience, NSYNC, it's here we go. Like whatever it was. Like, oh guys, this one is an NSYNC song.
right.
I was not gonna listen to it, but now I know that I should.
So let's move on to Celebrity, and we'll save
Fair
No
enough.
Strings. I'll start off.
I know what you want to say here.
I mean, they have one song on the whole album. It's pop. They have one song. Like, literally, the first track on the album is the only song that anybody's really going to remember on this album. And I'll say that this album, it's really going to reflect later because...
But did you not sympathize with how difficult it is to be them in their ballad Celebrity? You know, everybody wants to be with them because they're a celebrity.
It's such a struggle.
Celebrity.
Yeah.
Celebrity.
I will say very legitimately, this highlighted for me their songwriting talent because this album featured by far the most songs written by members of NSYNC. And it is by far their worst album.
And can I also mention that one of the co-writers on the track Girlfriend was Pharrell?
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah.
I did see that. But yeah, that's all I got about that.
I mean, look,
it's just real bad.
Same thing. I'm gonna say, like, most of my comments next to these songs were, "Ugh, stop using weird video game sounds." Like that was it. Like
Which
it
you
was
could
just,
call the invention of the techno genre.
Yeah, I mean, it was
So,
really bad.
Do
There
we
was
give them points
one
for inventing
song-
a genre?
No, absolutely.
Well,
not.
I tell you, it's a good thing that music nowadays is pretty much streamed because I can only imagine trying to listen to this album on CD and just assuming every 5 seconds your CD is skipping.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I would say "Gone" was the only other track that I've obviously never heard before, but it was very like a very kind of cool a cappella thing that was going on with it for a while.
Right.
That was the only thing that for like a minute I didn't hate.
Okay. Let's move on to
Done.
No Strings Attached.
I
Nick,
agree.
give us your opinions on No Strings.
Okay. So, obviously, like you mentioned before, this has got some of their biggest hits. So, Bye 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 is obviously the huge track from this album, and it's followed up with It's Gonna Be Me, which
Right.
are the two biggest ones, basically. It does not get any better after that. I mean,
No.
like, the best
Hold
I can
on.
say is
You're
like,
not gonna like-
bad.
You're not going to say you didn't like Space Cowboy Yippee-Yi-Yay featuring Lisa Left Eye Lopez?
Look, I mean, I like TLC and all, but no.
No, I know.
Bringin' the Noise. They literally called one of their songs Bringin' Da D-A Noise.
And I would
it was-
argue that it is not even close to as bad as Digital Get Down.
Yeah, I agree. But I just like, as soon as you titled it Duh, automatically it's bad. Like, you
That's
can't
fair.
be good and also have Duh. Like, you're like the 5 whitest guys who have ever lived.
Yep. Well, JC Chazé. I mean,
Okay, fair enough. That's all I have
which
for this. I mean,
Denoise was written by him. Bringin' Denoise was written by JC Chazé.
it just sounds
okay.
forced to me.
Let's
It's-
move right on. Obviously, we are probably not the intended audience for NSYNC, and I'm sure that there are people that really enjoy them.
Sure.
I really enjoy, like I said, 4 or 5 of their songs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, you know, because like here's the thing. I know when I say that I like NSYNC, everyone thinks like I'm saying that ironically. That's not true. It's just I like the 5 NSYNC songs
Right,
that
sure,
everybody knows
sure.
the lyrics to. And quite honestly, I think anyone who claims to be a fan of NSYNC when you're at a party with a bunch of people is the exact same way.
And I'll tell you right now,
Because-
as you know, a member of a cover band, we have multiple times gotten requested to sing like "Bye Bye Bye," and
enough.
we'll do it, and the entire place erupts. I mean, people really enjoy the popular NSYNC songs,
Right, and that speaks
they
to their
just
cultural
have
impacts.
they just
That's
have
what-
a very big dichotomy in the good songs and then the really not good songs.
And I think
They're not consistent in their
it has
songs.
helped them significantly that Justin Timberlake has been a significant public figure
Oh, yeah,
for the entire time up
absolutely.
until now. Up until the present, Justin Timberlake's fame helps keep alive what NSYNC
Right.
was.
So let's roll into some scores here.
Yeah, and that brings us to cultural impact. So
I mean, their cultural impact is super high to me.
Yeah, their cultural impact is definitely high. I mean, even if you take away a lot of the, showbiz aspect of their fame, like Justin Timberlake dating Britney Spears and that whole scene, even if you remove that from it, I mean, people still know who NSYNC is.
Right.
You can say the word NSYNC, and even if somebody doesn't even know a single one of their songs, they might get them confused with the Backstreet Boys, but they at least know who they are. So I would
they know of them.
Say,
they know that there was the feud, the competition between them and the Backstreet Boys, and even you're not going to get a out of people. You might get an ugh.
Yeah, right.
Or you might get like a but you're never going to get like, I don't know who you're talking about.
True. I will say, I mean, let me just, because you guys are giving all the positives, just the caveats in there. One, we're all in our late 20s. So
correct, and
we are literally the
and
time where we
old.
we all grew up very, very specifically at the exact time when they were the most popular. So I think it's fair to say that we may slightly overestimate where they were in our heads because of who we were when this stuff was popular, and two, just thinking about in 50 years from now, are they going to be remembered when we're all old, or when people from our generation have died and it's new generations listening to music? Is NSYNC something that they're ever going to remember 50 or 60 years from now? Those are my two caveats for their cultural impact.
Right. Okay.
And I think it's just important to note that stuff. Will they be remembered, and do we overestimate them because they were popular during our childhood?
Fair enough. You're not wrong on a lot of that stuff. I get you. So what score would you give, Nick?
So I'm not saying it's below average. I mean, I think it's still definitely above average. It's higher than Oasis's even, just because of, all the references to them in movies and popular culture and everything. But I would have a hard time going higher than a 7.5 to 8.
Okay.
Yeah, I would probably say 8, just because, again, whether it's legitimate fans or ironic fans, there is still somewhat of a voice out there.
Right.
Going to a karaoke bar, if somebody does one of their songs a karaoke thing, it's gonna draw a crowd.
I agree.
Yeah, and I also had an 8. So, I mean, if we want to go a little bit under 8, like a 7.8-ish.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I've got it typed in. 7.8 it is.
Okay, breadth of work, 1 point for each album.
I'm
Maybe
fine
a
with
3 overall, because
I'm fine with that.
I mean, they're just super inconsistent. They have, like I said, 5 good songs.
5 songs
out
that
of,
are going to stand,
the 40 songs
for
that
a
they
while.
released.
People know, but other than that,
so
3
low,
is as
significantly
good as they
below
can get.
average.
I totally agree.
Instrumental talent.
Did any of them play an instrument? Or
No.
only
So here's my tough part for me personally, and then I'll let you get your point in, Tyler. Vocals are strong.
Sure.
They are good singers. But I know, Tyler, what you're about to say. You're about to say that they don't showcase the vocals.
Yeah, well, see, here's my thing. We know that they're good singers now.
Yeah.
We've heard Justin Timberlake do other things. We've heard other members do other things.
Right.
In just their studio albums that were released, you have maybe 30 seconds or less of harmonies that pop through, and then the rest of it is just completely watered down with digital instruments and whatnot.
Okay.
So I on the one hand, it's we've heard them now outside of the filters and stuff, and we know that they're good singers, but it's almost like, I don't think I would give T-Pain a high score for his vocal talent. But I've heard T-Pain sing outside of using the auto-tune, and he's a phenomenal singer.
I was about to just really go to bat for T-Pain. I was like, wait a minute, he is so talented.
No, I have definitely heard him sing outside of using auto-tune, and he's a great singer. But
I'll also fight on T-Pain for a lot of things, because T-Pain invented auto-tune just to get famous. This isn't a T-Pain podcast.
I found a weird niche for that I didn't know existed.
All right.
So where are we at on instrumental?
So my personal opinion is, if you give them just based on their instruments minus singing, it would just be like a 1 or a 2.
Right.
I think in between 3 and 4, because all of them sing well.
I'd have to say 3.5.
It's just, all of them sing, and they sing well.
3.5.
Even though they don't showcase it enough, you can hear that there's talent.
Right. Because all the music behind them is just boring, churned out in a computer garbage.
Songwriting talent.
I've heard rumors.
Again, not many people have written their song. Like, a lot of them were written for them or written by other people.
And the songs that they wrote are bad. So I would give... I don't think I could give them over a 2.
I would love to give them a 2 for some reason.
I don't think I can give them over a 2
just because like there's
and we're gonna kind of push through the rest of NSYNC because none of it is good.
No,
Poetic Talent again.
Yeah, they're not singing about anything. They're starting to sing about something and then fall short of actually having anything to say about it.
There's no substance to them.
None.
And
breakups
the
are
ones
sad.
The ones that are written
saying.
by them are just so like, again, really sloggy. Like they're just really
screaming the same 2 words over and over and over again most of the time. So it's not like a
there's at least words.
It's like
I would I would give them a 2-ish, maybe a little under because I think
about 1.8.
I'm fine with it.
1.8 it is.
X Factor, we could maybe choose to give them a little bit
for launching JT's career.
If we wanted to do that. That is up to you guys. I rescind my...
Pat's not giving any credit to the Mouseketeers there. It was all NSYNC.
I think it is... Listen, and I said that to you before.
I have no
so
idea
we talked about this a little bit before we recorded. And I said, like, I think Justin Timberlake was launched by the Mouseketeers.
That'd be a weird
He was brought into
to
NSYNC to be like one of the faces of NSYNC because of his previous fame with the Mouseketeers.
I believe that is true, even though I have no knowledge to back that up. I
wouldn't give them a point for X Factor.
Okay, I'm fine with it.
I would totally give them a point for X Factor because of them and the Backstreet Boys. NSYNC ended up on an episode of The Simpsons. So they're getting some X Factor points from me.
Honestly, Backstreet Boys have more good songs.
Here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say about NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys real quick. My personal opinion is neither one of them would have been as famous if the other one didn't exist.
Great. I
really think that the competition between the two of them skyrocketed both of them.
I love it. That'll be interesting to hear your take on that with the Beatles and the Stones.
Yeah.
I think it would have been an amazing thing for our generation musically if NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys became one band because we might have gotten at least one more album.
Fair enough.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, let's just do the Beatles. It's time.
Yeah. Okay. So the Beatles.
I had absolutely no idea who these guys were.
As a huge Beatles fan,
I am the big Beatles.
I'm going to let you give their little blurb that I've been given.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I think this is truly, if there is any artist that we're ever going to do, the artist that needs no introduction. I mean.
Cool. So no introduction. Let's move right in.
Widely considered to be, the most famous and important rock band of all time. Came to the United States in the early 60s, and between 63 and 70 released 13 studio albums that are all pure gold. Really, really impressive.
A nice unbiased opinion from Nick.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on. You can't argue that the Beatles are bad. But the 3 albums that we looked at, their first, last, and highest selling would be Please Please Me is first in 1963. Let It Be was in 1970. And then in 68 was the White Album, which had the most sales. However,
we also
individual
added,
sales.
No, but we also added
Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah, Sgt. Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper had the most individual sales by single, if you added those in as well.
Yeah.
So we did listen to Sgt. Pepper as well. And even with all that being said, like, we didn't even listen to either of my favorite. Like, we didn't listen to Revolver, which is my favorite Beatles album. Like, there's a million songs, and I could go on forever. But I'm just going to start with my opinions on Please Please Me. And
sure,
and
then we'll move on from there.
So a lot of the early Beatles stuff had a handful of covers on all the albums up until, I think, A Hard Day's Night. I loved all of the covers on this one. I feel to me like they're more Beatles songs than anything else at this point, like Twist and Shout, Chains, Anna, Go to Him. Those are some of my favorite tracks on this whole disc. And I saw Her Standing There was the other huge one besides Twist and Shout that's really kind of stood the test time. Love Me Do was also one of their very first big singles. But I'll let you guys go because I could talk about the Beatles all day.
Wait, you got a disc? I was listening on cassette. I think what I really like about this album is you can definitely tell this is where they started out because it just sounds like everything else that was being put out at that time, but it somehow still manages to stick out more.
There's moments in there, yeah, for sure.
I also think like it's incredible when you're a band and a bunch of your songs end up being covers, and those covers end up kind of becoming the definitive versions of those songs that everybody goes back and references to. Because in the early days of music, performers and bands didn't necessarily write songs. There was usually people who wrote songs and then singers sang them. And that's why you have so many different versions of like classic songs. And we all sort of have our own, opinion on which one we like more. But these Beatles versions of other bands' songs are the ones that are the first ones that come up.
Right. Yeah. And for me personally, I really enjoy the songs on this album that were written by the Beatles.
Sure.
So, I mean, for instance, I Saw Her Standing There. And we kind of discussed that maybe it didn't age as well lyrically, but
sure.
Instrumentally.
Yeah, but then again, the
really
legal age in the UK is 17.
It's
only weird here.
And I don't think those were kind of like they were trying to figure out the words. I remember watching an interview with Paul once, and he like just couldn't figure out what to rhyme with it, and you know what I mean.
Yes.
And then they eventually just kind of came with just 17.
But I mean, for instance, I really like some of the interesting stuff they did, like. Do You Want to Know a Secret is interesting and it's different. And I like that. Yeah. And I like that even on their first album, you got to witness the fact that all 4 Beatles were lead vocals on songs.
Absolutely.
Super rare to do. Like you may have a band where all 4 members of the band sing and do harmonies. I mean, Styx, Queen, all those Tons, they come to mind. Right. The Eagles, but. Beach Boys. Yeah, Beach Boys, obviously, they're too. But the Beatles were the band that, okay, cool, Ringo, you're going to be the lead vocalist on this.
Passively,
you're going to do a decent job. You're going to be a good lead vocalist. Same thing with you, George. And then obviously you have Lennon McCartney, so super strong,
fantastic.
And I don't exactly know the music history behind this thing that I'm about to say, but this is just something that sort of like happened with me. I'm sure somebody else might have popularized this, but like the Beatles seem to kind of run with it. They were like at least one of the first bands from the 60s who really like popularized the callback. So they've got like these great moments like in Twist and Shout, where they're calling back the last end to it. They did that with they have all these really
it's
interesting...
almost like a conversation in the song.
They have all these interesting harmonies that they throw in that don't need to be there. Like, do you want to know a secret? Do-da-do, which is not necessarily something that had to be there vocally.
I think what you're getting at, and excuse me if I'm saying this wrong, but they changed the game from just harmonies to truly writing backing vocal parts that were
exactly.
That were complementing the rest
Beatles
of the lead
are one of
almost in counterpoint.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the Beatles are one of the few bands that I can listen to, and I might not necessarily want to sing the lead.
Yeah.
When I listen to the track back. Sometimes what's happening in the background, to me, vocally, is more interesting and pleasing than what's happening, but I wouldn't get rid of one or the other.
Right, I totally agree with you.
And I will say a lot of times with the Beatles, as somebody who sings like a lot, I will almost always sing harmony when I'm listening to something. And the Beatles are one of the few things that I can listen to where I'm always singing a part that is already in there.
Yeah, right.
It really feels no matter what I'm singing, no matter what harmony I come up with, it is already in the track.
Beautiful.
So let's move on
to Let It Be. So can I just say that widely considered to be kind of their worst album in some ways, or like a big disappointment at the end of their career?
I get it.
Like, and I'm not saying by me, because I love it. But in a lot of ways, this is kind of thought back on as like, oh, you know what? This was really not their strongest album. Oh. But then you go through the tracks and so many enduring, beautiful pieces like Across the Universe, Let It Be, Get Back, The Long and Winding Road, that were all very popular and good songs and continue to be popular. Two of Us is a great McCartney-Lennon harmony all the way through.
I think what would have made Let It Be stand out a little more and less of the black sheep of their releases is if they just tightened it up.
Yeah.
Because there are a number of tracks in there that you can tell just like aren't finished. There's that one track, I don't remember the name of it right now, but it's
Dig
only...
It or Maggie May, one of those two skits.
It's 50 seconds and nothing happens in the song. There's no interesting melody. It's just kind of like, it's there, you're like, oh, what's this song about today? And then it's over.
Right.
And I think that even though there's only like 2 or 3 instances of that happening on this album, it's enough that when the general listener puts the album on, they're like, oh, this is their worst album. Because it's just, why did I buy a full album and I get these tracks that are super short?
And I think those to make the cut, when Don't Let Me Down had to be on the Let It Be Naked version, and Don't Let Me Down is like one of their best songs, especially the late Beatles. I mean, just beautiful.
I mean, my thought process for me, like, whenever I listen to album stuff, I always try to like put myself like emotionally where the group is. You can really tell that they are done.
Oh, yeah.
They are done as a group before this album comes out. I mean, this album came out after they broke up. Right? I'm pretty sure,
I believe it was, I don't remember if I heard this, if I'm remembering this correctly, but I believe Ringo had to personally go to Paul McCartney's house and request that Paul McCartney delay his solo album because it was going to conflict with the release of Let It Be.
So it was
Paul McCartney threw him out.
Yeah, Paul McCartney told
May 8th, 1970, 1 month after they had broken up.
So, and you could tell in the tracks. Okay, so let's keep going because I don't want to. I agree. I don't want to get
too much longer. I want to wrap things up. But then, the White Album would be the next thing we listen to. I will say, in all honesty, this is one of like the top 10 albums of all time for me.
Yeah.
It is the only Beatles album where there are songs that are not good. It is the only Beatles album on which there are songs that are not good, and that would be I'm sure you know if you're listening, Revolution Number 9 and Wild Honey Pie.
Yep.
Otherwise, it starts so strong. Back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, Glass Onion. It's got While My Guitar Gently Weeps and Happiness is a Warm Gun, all on the first side of the first disc.
Yep.
Martha, My Dear, I'm So Tired. Blackbird, one of the most endearing songs.
I do also...
Basically, it's very strong.
It's very strong.
I do also think that it's probably one of their most experimental.
Correct.
Yes, I agree.
Of all their albums. I don't think if you're a band and the first or second album you put out is the White Album, you would be putting out another one.
Sure.
Like, the reason why this album sold is because it was at the height of their popularity.
Very, very true.
You know, and it does but like, it does suffer from, like, anybody who knows about, you know, LPs and the record industry will know this phrase. It does have some of the B-est of B-sides on there.
Yeah, but 90% of these experiments worked, and really, like, Helter Skelter is like, oh, is this the first time heavy metal is music?
Yeah.
I mean, like, a lot of the experiments work really well.
Well, that's also an interesting thing going back to this album years later after it's been put out, because a number of these tracks were not liked when the album came out, but to a modern audience, they are there and they're appreciated. I mean, we're being a little harsh just because it's the Beatles and everybody already knows how great they are.
So you're being held up to the standard of yourself.
We're trying to nitpick where we can nitpick. So nobody should walk away from this thinking that we absolutely hate some of these not so popular Beatles songs from the White Album.
Yeah, it's like very much wasn't when Romeo and Juliet first came out, when Shakespeare wrote it and it was being performed, people really hated it because they weren't expecting it to just end with everyone dying, and they're like, what is this? Where is our happy ending? This isn't funny at all. These children are dead.
Well, I wasn't alive back then.
Well, fair enough. But it was not well received. Right? Pat, you're our theater guy. You're confirming this information for me.
I'm very much confirming that information to you.
So, yeah. But now we know it's great.
Right.
I do think that even some of its less popular songs are songs that I have taken to using at different things. I tell you, if you decorate your house for Halloween and you play Revolution 9 and you've got a left speaker and a right speaker and you're bouncing that in your garage or your front yard while people are coming to trick or treat, there's nothing to make you feel more uneasy than that song coming on.
Yeah.
I would seriously recommend anybody who's interested in music in general to pick up some of the re-releases and remasters of these Beatles albums where they actually put them in stereo surround sound, and you can hear, you already hear the experimentation that the Beatles put in with their music, but when you hear that coming out of 5 different speakers in a subwoofer,
right,
you really hear, what they were able to do and achieve with sound.
Yeah,
Okay.
and good Harrison and Star tracks on this. Only one Ringo track, Don't Pass Me By. Very good.
For sure, for
underrated
sure.
song. And George obviously has While My Guitar Gently Weeps, one of his best.
Real
NPs.
quick.
Of the two, this and Sgt. Pepper's, I personally would have to put Sgt. Pepper's higher because Sgt. Pepper's is definitely an album you put on and you listen to straight through. I don't think you can really do that with the White Album.
I would agree. Well, we did, but I would agree.
I actually am going to be the one dissenting was I prefer the White Album to Sgt. Pepper's, although I love Sgt. Pepper, and I will give it credit for being like one of the earliest attempts at like a concept album. We're opening up. Here we are. We're the band here playing at the Lonely Hearts Club. Here's our set. And then the reprise at the end, we're like, okay, thanks. We hope you had a great time listening to this live set by Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That's a really cool idea and experiment. Like, so uncommon at the time, for sure.
Cool. I'm totally with you. Real quick to touch on Sgt. Pepper's before we start giving them scores.
Mm-hmm. And I'll let you take the whole thing. I won't make any more comments.
Okay, that's fine. Again, as Nick said, really great concept album. So I would argue Paul McCartney's most impressive vocal, just overall, in Sgt. Pepper's, in the title track. The dude is wailing up there.
My only comment, Oh Darling might be better, but yes.
No, but it's a different type of,
Sure.
it's a different style of singing.
Yes.
Like when you think of Paul McCartney and stuff, you don't really think of like a super like, wow, like he's nailing those like growls and rasps.
Unbelievably great.
So I would argue that is up there. I do think it's really funny. Like I love Ringo, don't get me wrong, but just having him be singing the very next track after super impressive Paul McCartney is just not a good look for him.
But it's a great song.
It's a great song.
But they did pick a good song for somebody with a less.
Very, very true. I just always think it's funny. And I always gravitate towards vocals. And so whenever I hear like a really impressive vocal track followed up by like a it's, you know.
While Ringo is obviously less impressive as a lead vocalist than Paul, with a little help from my friends, is one of the best examples of what Tyler brought up earlier.
Very, very true. That counterpoint, that call and response.
And all of the counterpoint is in harmony, and everything is really well written as four-piece vocals.
And I think that, again, on this one, my favorite song, if I had to pick one, would probably be A Day in the Life.
Oh, yeah.
Great, great, great song. All the songs on this are good. I think you're going to kind of get where we're going with the grades on this. Let's start grading them.
Well, before we jump right into the grades, I definitely do think that if anybody out there truly is a Beatles fan, they do owe it to themselves. While the Beatles do these songs justice, I don't think you get a good understanding of the Beatles until you listen to Bugs Bunny and Friends sing the Beatles.
Oh my gosh, I knew you were going to bring
up. Of course.
That's a definitely put that on your list of things.
Cultural
it's on the internet for free.
It's on the internet.
Yes. Cultural impact. There's not even going to be an argument here. If any band or artist gets a 10, the Beatles get a 10.
You have to give
them
the
most important artists ever, really, when it comes to rock music.
The Beatles and Yanni, I think.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, so this
I
might
know
be
for
where we
breadth
get into
of work,
an argument.
I know for breadth of work, so Nick and I had already previously discussed this.
We had a little bit of an argument.
And we disagree on this.
Yeah, but I
defaulted to him. I defaulted to him. Yeah, I know you agree with Nick, which is why I defaulted.
Right.
My personal opinion, which I'm going to say first, because you're going to get what you want.
Yes.
I think that their breadth of work should be very, very high. It should be up there in the stratosphere because every album they put out was absolute fire. Even Let It Be, which is kind of lambasted towards the end of it, is still really great and has a lot of great tracks. I just think that only having 7 years of putting out albums should take slightly away from the breadth of work because I think time should play an important part in the breadth of work.
Okay.
However, I was overruled by the other two who want to give their breadth of work a 10 just for quality and not take any points away from the very short time that it was all released.
Mr. Strawman over there. Let us put our real opinions out there.
So basically, where me and Nick fell on this is pretty much if you're a band and you're only together for 7 years and everything you put out in those 7 years is super memorable and praised more than 30 years after you stop doing stuff.
Yeah, 50 years now.
Yeah, that speaks to your breadth of work.
Absolutely.
There are many groups out there who started performing in the 60s and continue to perform today in some way or another. And I wouldn't necessarily say that their breadth of work is bad, but it certainly is not in the same category.
Yeah, and the only other further comment I'll make on that is this. So, to me, the 7 years is almost like a testament to them because they put out in those 7 years, and since we're comparing this to all the other artists that we're looking at, more genuinely great albums than any other band has ever put out, and more genuinely great individual songs than any other band has ever put out, in my opinion. So it's hard for me to say, well, who has the greatest amount of work? Not the band who has the most great albums and the most great songs. I couldn't imagine that. Like, the 7 years is only like, wow, how did they do that in such a short period of time?
To be quite clear, we were arguing the difference between like a 10 and a 9.8.
Sure, yes. we
Just
were
being very clear.
Yes, and we're very concerned about those 0.2 points.
I wasn't sitting here saying, let's give the Beatles
Patrick
a 5.
is wearing a t-shirt that says, I dislike the Beatles.
Yeah, no one can see it. He's actually got an Eagle shirt on, so it's
yeah.
So instrumental talent. Now, this is where I will allow them to not get a 10, because as talented of musicians as all the Beatles are, they're not like virtuosos. Obviously, like,
very true.
Their strongest would be vocals, I would say, as far as instruments go, because Paul McCartney is like a vocal virtuoso as a tenor. Like, he's fantastic. John is an excellent singer. George is a good singer, and Ringo is a very passable singer and very good at singing harmony. Like, vocally, they're about as good as a band gets. Vocally.
Again, just I feel the need, like, I feel to just kind of push through because we know we're going to give them all high scores.
Yes.
I mean, my score for the Beatles instrumental talent was going to be an 8.
And I agree.
Yeah, again, this is a category I can't really speak to.
Yeah,
the Beatles was the only band that I ever got passionate about growing up. So obviously there's some rose-tinted glasses there in that regard. Like,
nothing like the crimson ones Nick's wearing, though. Don't worry.
No, mine
but
I have an entire rose bush on my face.
But then again, as somebody who grew up listening to loads and loads of music, granted, it was my dad's music that he listened to when he was a kid, and never wanting to follow any of these bands, just wanting to collect songs, listening to the Beatles and making that decision, I want to collect this band.
Yeah.
Should speak to them in some... Are
you saying that the Beatles started your love of collecting in general?
Yes.
Definitely started my love of collecting music. I wouldn't necessarily give them credit for my film collection. Although,
I would. So
although another recommendation I'd have to put out for all you diehard Beatles fans out there, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the musical. If you've ever once wondered in your life what it would sound like if the Bee Gees did the Beatles music, and the lead,
why would you do that?
And the lead vocalist was Peter Frampton.
Interesting choice. Not bad, but interesting.
That's exactly what you got here.
Well,
Steve Martin sings Maxwell Silverhand.
Fascinating. All right.
So moving on, songwriting
I'll
talent.
make my pitch. And
Go ahead, make your pitch.
So my pitch is also, so I see the Beatles as the cultural impact, breadth of work, and songwriting talent are the three categories where I see, generally just view the Beatles as the standard bearers.
Okay.
And so if we are comparing these bands to each other, and it's just like who is the best of everyone here, this is why I would give the Beatles 10, because I do see them as the best when it comes to songwriting talent. Every album that they put out completely redefined music. Every album from at least Sgt. Pepper's, even really Revolver and Rubber Soul on, was like, wow, this is something totally new that no one has ever done before every single time. And as we've discussed, all those albums are great in their differences. And I don't think you can discount how huge of a factor the way that they wrote their vocals, like we've talked about at length. Like, they were the first band to really make all these different vocal parts work for them, and they did that with a huge variety of instrumentations throughout albums, a huge different number of styles of song.
And I'll say, Beatles, probably the only band that could put out a song about a jealous ex threatening to kill her if she gets in a relationship with another man, and make that sound upbeat and fun.
Yeah, Run for Your Life is a great song.
Okay, so my counterpoint, and I really just hate that you two are making me counterpoint against the Beatles.
But it's important.
So my counterpoint is, I agree with everything you said about them being, quote unquote, the standard bearer.
Well, if your counterpoint is to agree, I think that's an overall win.
For me, a 10 in, these categories, songwriting, poetic talent, instrumental talent, means absolute perfection. And I don't think the Beatles
well, you know what? Pat has
have
a
written
10.5.
perfect songs.
Okay.
I think that they have written songs that can be considered very, very good and even like the standard. I just don't think you can put a 10 because I don't think anything is perfect.
So basically what you're saying is we have a
11's for.
semantic disagreement about what songwriting 10 means. Is
Correct.
Essentially what you're saying. Okay. And
I think that you're just comparing it
to other artists and musicians.
But I think that like 10, like if you are the absolute maximum score, that means that nobody ever has any chance to improve upon that. And while I don't think anyone necessarily will, I think that we should leave the door open and put them at like a 9.5.
This will make Pat happy. For this category and this category alone, we'll give the Beatles 10 out of 11.
Look, I understand what you're saying. Let me just put it this way. If we are going to think of it in that terms and leave the door open, I mean, like, we have to realize that 9.5 is probably where songwriting tops out. And that no one will ever get a perfect score.
That's not true.
And that's okay. Like, as long as
if we do 1,000 of these,
right?
I'll tell you right now.
And we realize that, okay, we've never even come close, blah, blah, blah. And then we can choose to come back and bump them up. And
I'm okay with that.
Release a correction.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. But I think right now, giving them a 10 in songwriting would be, in the very first episode, to max out our songwriting.
I'll allow it.
You know what?
Is a lot.
I'm getting where Pat's coming from. I definitely think 9.5 is where they should sit, because I'm also remembering now, like, if we put the Beatles at 10, where are the Cheetah Girls going to sit?
There it is. Okay. Poetic talent.
Poetic talent,
much above average. They have a bunch of stuff that's silly, but for every silly song, they have a Blackbird, a Long and Winding Road, a
and
Yesterday.
I will say that my personal opinion would be, the way that I do this is I start at 5.
Sure.
I add points for the good songs. I take away points for the cheesy songs.
Fair enough.
Which left me at about an 8 for them.
I'm totally fine with 8.
Because for every, Long and Winding Road, Let It Be, there's, those kind of repetitive, like Love Me Do.
Sure.
Great tune.
Absolutely.
Very
for 1963,
repetitive.
Awesome.
I would just say 8.1, just so it doesn't seem like I'm just copying Pat.
So do we average that out to an 8.05? No. I think 8's fine. Yeah, 8's fine. And then X Factor, and we're wrapped up for episode number 1. For me, X Factor is that the Beatles have been basically the way that rock music came to America, and it's basically started off everything for everyone, and all of the rock and pop music that we've had since has a lot of credit to the Beatles for having that.
This is Nick's push for a 5 out of 5.
That is the perfect X Factor. I don't think you can give another band a higher cultural impact
Pat
plus score. I mean, the Beatles.
I'll tell you this right now. The Beatles wrote all the songs on the daycare CDs that we play at the daycare for nap time.
Fair enough. But yeah,
all right, 5 out of 5 for me. I'm fine.
All right,
fine with
so that brings us to our 3 final scores of the day.
So read your final scores of the day, and then we will wrap this first episode up.
Agreed. So our loser for the episode, unfortunately, and I know you guys are going to be surprised to hear this, is NSYNC with a score of 18.1 out of 50.
Out of 50.
Yes.
5 out of 55.
Well, technically 55, yes. So
we definitely loaded the barrel against them.
I felt real bad. Poor
we
JT.
wanted something different. We didn't just want...
Exactly.
It has to be fun
there's
for
different,
us, too,
and
right?
then there's the Beatles versus NSYNC.
Yeah, that's real rough.
Okay, so obviously I think we all know who's going to come in second place, Oasis, with a score of 30.2 out of 50 or 55, which is very respectable, I think. And then the Beatles, of course, were the big winners with a score of 50.5 out of 55 total with the bonus.
Yep. So
there's our big winner for the day.
I will say that after we get a little bit more of these done, we're going to be publishing a list on our website, which is lowtotemband.com. Feel free to check that out. Check out our social medias. Instagram is low_totem. Facebook.com/lowtotemband. And yeah, that's going to wrap us up for our first episode of Totem Talks.
Awesome.
Stay tuned. We're going to be releasing more episodes. We're going to do about 3 artists. We're going to be planning on releasing it weekly. And we would like to hear some feedback from you guys, whatever bands you want to hear us do. Maybe like an interesting combination of bands. Feel free to, email us, message us on any of our social media with ideas for our podcast.
But until then,
and
just
use the hashtag TotemTalks.
Yes, good idea. In that case, keep in mind that next week, if you want to stay tuned, one of the 3 artists I will reveal, and one only, one artist that we'll be looking at are the Ramones.
Yes, very true.
Episode. So stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned for that, and everybody stay safe and have a great day.
All right.